was the experience of being in Turkey and Germany during the height of the Cold War? And this was, at this point, during the height of the Cold War, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. No question. That's why it was being done. My memories of Turkey were, are very vivid. It was a real small town, middle of nowhere. I lived in town. Most people lived on the base, but I didn't want to do that. So a bunch of us had the rooming house. We lived in town. And, that way you got to meet the local people. It's, those were the days when you still had ox carts with wooden wheels. Women walked around with yokes with water balanced on their shoulders. And the men played cards in the coffee shop. Interesting times. And you could hear them in the morning doing their prayers and the chants all over the town. Befriended a lot of people. There was the hotel we ate at. The food was just incredible, and you could see these guys all. It was what they called a deluxe hotel, but you could tell the economic hardships these people had. All the tablecloths were pressed perfectly, but they all had holes in them because they just were worn out. They had tuxedos that they wore in this hotel. And, they were all threadbare, but they were always clean, perfectly white, black. Amazing. They took great pride in the food, things like that. We got to know everybody, so Turkish is a difficult language. I never did learn much of it, but just a few key words, which I probably couldn't remember today, but maybe some profanity. I don't know. But we had an occasion one time to, these were huge antennas all looking towards Russia, the other side of the Black Sea. And we really didn't have a good handle on how the antennas were performing. So this is where I'd met Fred Schumacher, who I later in life spent a lot of time with. But Fred was a bright microwave physicist, a really smart guy. He was over there as a consultant to General Dynamics, and he's the one that we were talking. How do we bore sight these antennas? And we thought about it and said, well, maybe if we could get a signal generator into a boat, we could putt along across the face of this facility and see how well the antennas work at different frequencies. So we had a fisherman friend that we knew, had met. When we ate dinner, he was the guy that would bring the fish in. So we got to know him. And he agreed to take his boat and allow, he rented it to us along with himself. And we went out with some relatively crude equipment, but so we could portably operate a few signal generators with some, two-way radios. Nothing like you have today, for sure. But we were out there in the Black Sea, and we did it a couple of days, and so the third day, it was really nasty weather, but we wanted to get it done. And we also wanted to see the effects of the fog and the weather and stuff. And the fisherman was pretty pleased. He didn't mind. He knew where he was. So we went out there, and me and a guy by the name of Dave, and I can't remember his last name, we were out there with him. Fred was on shore. because he was the one trying to figure out what the antennas were doing. And the fisherman's up front, and I was sort of towards the back of the boat. And all of a sudden, this guy turns white. Literally. And he turns off the engine and starts grabbing his poles and throwing them out. Putting the lines out. And he points. It's right like this. Points. Within about 100 yards was a Russian destroyer.
Oh my gosh.
They were out of the fog.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. So, anyway, we both checked our pants, and we went back to shore pretty quick. But that was interesting.
And you weren't that far from shore, probably, right? I mean,
We may have been a mile off.
Okay.
Yeah, at least a mile, yeah. I mean, they I don't know what the limitations were, but we could have been even further.
yeah.
I mean, Fred was wanting some interesting interesting data, and we basically managed to get all the antennas tuned in right just by doing it that way. It's something that nobody ever thought of in advance.
That's fun. Well, that's a big part of your mantra, or not mantra, but way of doing things. You do things, I don't want to say seat of the pants, but you're very flexible. You can adjust to the way things are, adjust to the stream of life.
Or figure out, you got to figure out what to do, that's all.
Yeah.
I mean, so we didn't have any choice. But to do it that way, it never occurred to us that, that it would turn out that way either, but it did. So.